Hey guys, what are we talking about? Right, we're talking about why I dislike arrows made from modern materials. Now I'll just do a quick run through of the main reasons and then I'll come back to them and expand on the reasons why. Point one, they're too bloody expensive. I had a look this afternoon. Well, okay, so the first one, they're too expensive. Two, the materials. They're an example of an unsuitable material put to an unsuitable purpose. Three, they are so unforgiving as to be a deterrent to learning how to shoot, learning how to do archery. Four, they're boring. They've got no soul, got no character. They are dead. There's nothing even remotely challenging about them. It's just horrible. Fifth one, generally speaking, I think they are potentially dangerous to people, to us, to human beings. Potentially dangerous. Right, so if you don't want to hear the reasons why each of those categories why I don't like them if you don't want to stick around to hear my explanation of each one of those categories, just go away now. Stop it now, because you know I've told you why I don't like them, but we'll come back to it. Right, so first thing, cost. They are disgustingly expensive for what they are. Now, what do I mean? Right, okay. The price you will pay for a cheap set of, we'll say carbon fibre, a cheap set of carbon fibre arrows and an expensive set of carbon fibre arrows is vast. There's a vast difference in between them. For instance, these ones. These are super lightweight, super consistent, but they only cost 50 quid a dozen. I found this afternoon online arrows made, the only difference between these arrows and the ones I found this afternoon, these have got a 1.5 inch, I think, or 1.75 inch fletch. The ones I found this afternoon were a 2 inch fletch. These have got a 125 grain point. The other ones had a 125 grain point, but instead of a bullet point, they had a 3D point. The shaft length was exactly the same. Shaft diameter, internal and external, was exactly the same. The weight was exactly the same. And yet these, for a dozen, cost the same as one of the others. A set of 5 arrows, almost identical, other than the name, cost £250 for 5 arrows. These cost £50 for 12 arrows, and yet they were almost identical, with the exception of the big brand name. Now, a lot of you will say, well, yeah, but that's down to the materials used. No, it isn't. It isn't. The carbon fibre is carbon fibre is carbon fibre. It's either injected, moulded, or extruded. There's no other way of saying anything about it. That's how carbon fibre is formed. It's either injected, moulded, or extruded. The only difference is in the length of the fibre used. That's the only difference. And that depends on the purpose that it's going to be put to. And that's the only difference. And a lot of the time, carbon fibre arrows are basically posh glass fibre, because the way they are made is fibres mixed with carbon fibres mixed with a resin, which is then extruded and then put in an autoclave. That's how they're made. That's it, pure and simple. So why would these be the same price for a dozen as the ones with a big name on are for one? It's a rip-off. It's a complete and utter disgusting rip-off. Now the problem with that is a lot of people who've got a lot of money will spend a lot of money on the arrows and expect to be able to get that level of performance out of them. The problem is the average shooter can't get that performance out of them. So anyway, that's cost. Materials. We'll start with aluminium. Aluminium makes a good, relatively strong, lightweight arrow. The problem is, if you are underspined, if the arrow is underspined through the power of the bow, if it's too long for the bow and the shooter, or if you hit the target at a funny angle and it shanks off the edge of the target, that arrow is bent and it's useless. And unless you've got some fairly technical toolage available, you ain't going to straighten it. You can't just bend it back into shape because it'll kink, and that's it, done. So once you bend, for most people, once you bend those aluminium arrows, they're thrown away. I actually saw a guy years ago turn up at an archery club when aluminium arrows were all the rage, and he just bought a set of 6, and I think he paid like £10 each for them. Really nice looking arrows. They were all polished up, they were nice and shiny, and they had an anodized finish. They were really nice arrows, and he bent every single one of them the first time he fired them because they were £10 underspined for the bow he was shooting. The arrows were £30 arrows. They were like an 1100 spine, and he was shooting a 43 pound Olympic recurve bow. And because they hit the target at 40 yards at a slight angle, they bent. Because we've all seen it happen. It happens, and they do that. Well, his target, the arrows hit that target so fast because they were a lot faster than he was used to at the range he was shooting at, and they just did that and bent. And that was it. We're done. A dozen arrows, each one shot once, ruined, gone. So that's aluminium. Fiberglass. Fiberglass is a horrible material. I've used fiberglass industrially in the automotive trade. I've actually got a friend who lost a finger because of fiberglass. Some of the resin was blown under his skin with some of the glass fibre from because of a high pressure airline. He lost his finger because of an infection. They couldn't get the crap out of his finger. His finger became infected. He lost his finger. There was nothing they could do about it. Finger gone. Took the whole lot. So he's actually got a 4-finger hand because it was so bad that I had to take this part as well. Horrible stuff. When fiberglass breaks, it leaves the fibres behind and the resin flakes off in a cloud. Similar sort of thing happens with carbon fibre. When carbon fibre breaks, it just snaps clean, but it releases a cloud of fibres. Now there's footage on you can find footage on YouTube, online, of carbon fibre and fiberglass breaking under tension, and you literally see a cloud just go and just brightly like shiny glittery bits of fibre in the air. Now if you just happen to walk into that cloud, you breathe that in, you're going to have problems, maybe not straight away, maybe not for a long time, but potentially you've just given yourself cancer. If you get that crap in your eyes, you're going to have problems straight away. If you get it onto your skin and just try and rub it off, even if you don't realise, for instance, if you've broken an arrow on a target and you pull the other arrows out, the act of pulling that out, there's glass fibre, carbon fibre on those arrows, you've embedded it in your hand. Horrible stuff. Again, it's an example of an unsuitable material for an unsuitable purpose. So, next one. They're unforgiving. Now, they do have their place. For instance, if you were a top flight Olympic world archery standard target shooter, you were going to need something like this. Incredibly flat shooting, fast, consistent arrows. These arrows, as I talked about earlier on, exactly the same as 250-pound each arrows. These are capable of shooting a half-inch group, a 3-shot half-inch group at 50 yards. And if you're a good enough archer, you can do that. But the vast majority of people aren't. And the vast majority of people are going to get disheartened when they try to achieve those levels of accuracy. Even a shorter distance. They buy these arrows thinking they're going to be super duper accurate, and then the best they can achieve is a 3 or 4 inch group at 20 yards. And they get discouraged. How many times have you seen online archery equipment for sale, only used once? because the archer got disheartened, didn't like it because they couldn't achieve the results they were expecting to. Whether they watched the Olympics, whether they watched the World Archery Championships, whatever, they saw all this gear and saw exactly the same gear in the local archery shop. They bought it and expected to be able to shoot to that sort of level within a couple of months. Doesn't happen. However, if they'd started off with a wooden arrow, everybody expects wooden arrows to be relatively inaccurate. Don't know why, they just do. It's just one of those things because it's archaic, it's old-fashioned. So they expect them to be archaically accurate, which is a complete fallacy. But they don't mind so much if they shoot a 10-inch group. In fact, most people beginning archery with wooden arrows, if they hit the gold within half a dozen shots, they are over the moon. We're talking a gold ring as well. They are over the moon at 20 metres. Whereas if they kind of expect it with modern materials. Don't know why, but they just do. That's another thing. And they are dead and boring. And the problem is they are so, now this is going to sound weird. One of the problems they have is that they are so consistent. Now sounds weird, I know. But unless, like I said, you're a top flight archer who can take advantage of that consistency, you are going to have problems with them because they are so consistent as to be 100% unforgiving. That arrow will only go where you and your archery equipment and your archery target technique tell it to go. So if your technique is a little bit off, or if your equipment isn't absolutely perfect, as in you haven't got your button press set up properly, you haven't got your clicker set up properly, your archery rest isn't set up properly, all that sort of stuff, if it's not perfect, the arrow will only do what your equipment allows it to do. If your technique is even a half a millimetre out of alignment, those arrows they'll start off out of alignment. And by the time you get to 70 yards, that half a millimetre, a millimetre at your anchor point, for instance, or on your string fingers, could be the difference between an X-ring and a 6 or a 7. You see it all the time, where for no reason at all, a top flight archery in the World Championships will have just scored three X-rings, and then all they need is a 9 to win, and they get an 8. For no explanation, no reason whatsoever. But I can guarantee you it will be something as simple as the fact they've just relaxed a little bit, thinking I've got this in the bag, and their technique has been half a millimetre, their anchor has been half a millimetre out one way or another, a millimetre out one way or another, and it's gone from being an X-ring to an 8, when all they needed was a 9. You see it happen all the time, and I guarantee you, if you could analyse it down to that tiniest little thing, they will tell you they just relaxed a little bit and they were a little bit off with their technique. And that's the problem with these arrows. They are so consistent as to be a problem to your average archer, because they will literally only go where you direct them. And if your technique is off a little bit, you're going to miss. That's just part and parcel of it. Another thing that gets me as well, it's the opposite end of the scale to these. These are super duper, super fast target arrows. Yeah? And then you have on the opposite end of the scale, I can find these ones here. These are super duper heavyweight arrows. These weigh 600 grains each. They are monsters. Now, the only way, but they've only actually got 150 grain arrowheads. The shaft is so heavy because it's a thick walled shaft. It's like a 400 shaft arrow, really stiff, really heavy. The problem is, for me especially, well for me anyway, there's absolutely no reason for anybody to be shooting anything this heavy, because they're super slow. If you're shooting these at a club and you're shooting bareboat 50 metres, you're going to be shooting, where if I'm shooting these at 50 metres, well I won't be at the moment, but if I get to the point where I'm shooting these at 50 metres, at most I'll be probably aiming 6 foot high to come down onto the target. With these, you're aiming 20 foot high to come down on the target. It's just like, why are you using something so heavy? Now, if you're hunting, that's a different kettle of fish. You need a heavier arrow to impart that amount of energy. But here in the UK and places like that, we're not allowed to hunt with bows and arrows. So, like I said, they've got their place, but it doesn't really exist in my archery world. And for the vast majority of people, they don't apply to their archery world either. I mean, the only time I find these really, really useful is if I'm shooting a really heavy bow, because they are heavily spined. That's the reason why I've got these, but the weight of them is absolutely ridiculous. 600 grains is just monstrous. It's crazy. Anyway, that's enough for me rambling on and ranting on. Hope you found it interesting. I just thought I'd explain why I don't like modern materialed arrows. Not because I don't use them, not because I don't know how to use them, how to set them up and how to put them together. I do. I have done for a long time. I actually went to a demonstration a long time ago where a rep came to the club to try and sell everybody the latest in fiberglass arrows. And I actually bought 3, I think I bought a set of 3. And I shot them and I actually enjoyed shooting them. And then I broke one and then suddenly thought, no, I don't like that. Didn't buy any more for a long time. So I'm used to them, I know them. I just don't like them. Anyway, give me wood any day. Anyway, hope you found that interesting. Stay safe, keep slinging the sticks, and we'll talk again soon. Cheers, guys.